Welcome, scholars, to an episode of Engaging with ELA. I'm your host, Miss Amanda. You have got a great deal of fantastic learning to cover in a very short time, so I'll turn it over to your teacher today, Miss Thrash.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
Thank you, Amanda. Scholars, I'm an 11th and 12th grade teacher at Scott Central Attendance Center. I am so excited to be here today and to help you build your reading skills. Before we get started, you want to be sure that you have a pencil and paper, so go grab that really quick. Today we are going to experience the practice of reading aloud to students. Our read aloud goals include understanding sentence structures, increasing word knowledge, and building key vocabulary. Our focus standards are RL.11.1, RL.11.2, and RL.11.4. We will read a historical nonfiction text and a poem today. Now, here's a special note to both educators and parents. Reading aloud to others is so powerful. Read alouds provide rich language and knowledge-building experiences. Read alouds support a human's neural network for listening and speaking. Basically, read alouds build stronger readers and thinkers. Read in your classroom and at home each day to help students thrive. Let's begin our lesson. I'm going to begin today with a read aloud. What I want you to do as I read this text aloud, I want you to listen carefully and jot down any ideas that come to mind, if there's a connection to something else you've read, anything that stands out, unknown words, words that are powerful. Just jot those down as I read this text aloud. Now, this text comes from The Plea for 8 Hours by Terrence Powderly. So I'm about to read it. Remember, take careful notes. Listen carefully. Turn to statistics, and it will be seen that the mechanic dies many years in advance of the day laborer. One exercises the muscles alone. The other exercises the brain and muscle. The double wear ends existence more quickly. Later on in his text, he continues to write, men who work short hours are better educated than those who do not. They have more time in which to study. A thinking, studious man will learn that overexertion shortens life, and he will guard against it. Take a moment to reflect on what I just read to you, finish up your notes, and reflect on what you jotted down. Now, the first time that I read this text, a few words stood out to me. Those were statistics, studious, and double wear. Let's talk about those for a moment. The word statistics has to do with numbers and information that helps readers or listeners in the news make an inference about a topic. And Powderly wrote in his text that statistics showed that people who worked, as these men did back in the 1800s, and some women, the statistics showed that their life expectancy was shortened. I don't know about you, that is an idea that really sticks out to me. Another word that stood out to me was the word studious. When I look at the word studious, I see I-O-U-S at the end. Studious has the root word study, so it must be someone who studies a great deal. Double wear. When you look back at the text, Powderly is saying that these men who use both their mental capacity and their muscles have double wear on their bodies, and it shortens their life and ends existence. Powderly was using this text to describe the working conditions in the 1800s and how they were not ideal. He uses this essay to argue the needs for an 8-hour workday. Now let's take a look at some of the sentences more closely. Men who work short hours are better educated than those who do not. They have more time in which to study. A thinking, studious man will learn that overexertion shortens life, and he will guard against it. Take a look at these sentences and think about the structure. Look at the sentences again. What sentence structure do you see? Exactly. You see a semicolon here, an independent thought that can stand alone, another independent thought that can stand alone, joined together with a semicolon. This is a compound sentence because I have two complete thoughts joined together with a semicolon. Now take a look again at the second sentence. A thinking, studious man will learn that overexertion shortens life, comma, and he will guard against it. Again, we have two independent clauses. This time joined together with a comma and a coordinating conjunction. This is yet another way to combine information and make a compound sentence. Scholars, I want you to keep this in mind in your own writing because it's very important to vary your sentence structure in your own writing. And these are just a couple of ways that you can do so. Now that we've looked at sentence structure, let's look, actually I'm going to bring this paper back because I want you to look at this word right here, overexertion. Now, this is a word you may or may not know. As a reader, we come to words all of the time in our reading that we do not understand. So how can we handle them? Listen to the thoughts that I would have in my head as a reader coming across this word that uses word parts. I know that I've heard the word part over in words like overwhelmed. My mom tells me when she keeps my little girl that she gets a little overly excited about candy. So when I think of my knowledge of the word over, to me it means too much. Exertion, I've heard that used describing my father and his attitude towards his farm work. He often overexerts himself. And using this prior knowledge, I know that over means too much, exert means to put forth effort, and this ION at the end tells me this word is a noun, meaning too much effort is being put forth. And in the context of our read aloud, I think what Powderly is trying to say is it's the overexertion, the overworking of these people leading to their short lifespans. So what I want you to do today, as we read our poem, I want you to think about this information, put it in the back of your head. The Song of the Shirt by Thomas Hood was written in the 1800s, just like Powderly's essay was also written in the 1800s. Let's take a look and see what he does with this poem and what he says about the 1800s. I want you to remember that poetry is like peeling an onion. I love spaghetti. I cook my own spaghetti sauce. I put extra onions in there. It's so yummy. But in order to get that yummy sauce, I have to cut some onions, and I don't like that part. Think of reading a poem in the same way. That papery skin that's on that onion, that's just the first layer. We peel that back. And then there's another layer of skin that's a little bit tougher, but we peel that back. And then we get to the layers of the actual onion that we can use. And once we get there and we put it in our food, it's so yummy. The same idea with a poem. Let's take it layer by layer. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. We just take it one step at a time. So I want you to follow along with me as I annotate the beginning of the poem. I want you to listen to the thought process that I have as I go through my first read. Let's take a look. The Song of the Shirt by Thomas Hood. With fingers weary and worn, with eyelids heavy and red, a woman sat in unwomanly rags, plying her needle and thread. Stitch, 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 in poverty, hunger, and dirt. And still a voice of dolorous pitch, she sang the song of the shirt. When I look at this stanza, I see that there is a rhyme scheme. Rhyme scheme is the pattern of rhyme at the end of the lines. And I find that interesting because the title is called The Song of the Shirt. I also notice repetition of sound, weary and worn. That's called alliteration. Let's keep reading and marking up our passage. Work, 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 while the cock is crowing aloof, and work, 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 till the stars shine through the roof. It's oh to be a slave, along with the barbarous Turk, where woman has never a soul to save, if this is Christian work. Work, 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 till the brain begins to swim. Work, 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 till the eyes are heavy and dim. Seam and gusset and band, band and gusset and seam, till over the buttons I fall asleep and sew them on in a dream. Now I'm going to stop right there because immediately I have a connection here. When I think of what the speaker just said here, till over the buttons I fall asleep and sew them on in a dream, that makes me think of myself when I've done something so much and I say, oh, I could do that in my sleep. So she has done this so much that she could do it in her sleep. Oh, men with sisters dear. Oh, men with mothers and wives. It is not linen you're wearing out, but human creatures' lives. Stitch, 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 in poverty, hunger, and dirt, sewing at once with a double thread, a shroud as well as a shirt. I'm marking shroud because I'm not really sure what that word means. But why do I talk of death, that phantom of grisly bone? I hardly fear his terrible shape. It seems so like my own. It seems so like my own because of the fast I keep. Oh God, that bread should be so dear, and flesh and blood so cheap. Work, work, work. My labor never flags. And what are its wages? A bed of straw, a crust of bread, and rags. That shattered roof, this naked floor, a table, a broken chair, and a wall so blank my shadow, I thank, for sometimes falling there. Work, 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 from weary chime to chime. Work, 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 as prisoners work for crime. Band and gusset and seam, seam and gusset and band, till the heart is sick and the brain benumbed, as well as the weary hand. Work, 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 in the dull December light, and work, 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 when the weather is warm and bright, while underneath the eaves the brooding swallows cling, as if it shows me their sunny backs and twit me with the spring. Oh, but to breathe the breath of the cowslip and primrose sweet, with the sky above my head and the grass beneath my feet, for only one short hour to feel as I used to feel before I knew the woes of want and the walk that cost a meal. Oh, but for one short hour, a respite, however brief. No blessed leisure for love or hope, but only time for grief. A little weeping would ease my heart, but in their briny bed, my tears must stop, for every drop hinders needle and thread. With fingers weary and worn, with eyelids heavy and red, a woman sat in womanly rags, plying her needle and thread. Stitch, 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 in poverty, hunger, and dirt, and still with a voice of dolorous pitch, would that its tone could reach the rich, she sang this song of the shirt. Now, as I read that poem, you could see that I made notes, and you probably noticed I went ahead and made notes on the other pages for time. I have marked repetition, words that stood out to me, words that I didn't know. It's very similar to our read aloud, where I ask you to write down anything that stands out to you. That's what we're doing in our first read. And then in our second read, that second layer of the onion, we're just going to go back and do a little additional note taking. So I look here in the first stanza. We talked about alliteration here. And as I went through, I marked more repetition. In fact, over here, that's at the point I got here, I wrote repetition, because it is such a prevalent device we see in this poem. You even get to the last stanza and notice that this is very similar to the first stanza. So, why would Thomas Hood have used so much repetition in this poem? Was something to think about. Something else I notice, as we mentioned, is the rhyme scheme. We have worn, red, rags, thread, stitch and pitch, dirt and shirt. Now, when I think about rhyme, it makes me think of music and songs, because most songs that we sing, we are able to remember the words because they are so repetitive. So this has a song-like quality. And that's interesting because Thomas Hood actually used the title, The Song of the Shirt. So I want you to think about that use of repetition and that use of rhyme. What is Thomas Hood trying to say about working conditions in the 1800s? I think that he's trying to say, similar to what we saw in the read aloud, that working conditions weren't as they should have been, and something needed to be done about it. He just used a different mode to relay his message. While the read aloud was informational, here we have a poem with very similar themes. My next question is, how does Thomas Hood's use of repetition contribute to the poem? Again, that repetition helps drive his point home. She's doing this so much, working with these shirts, that she says she does it in her sleep. It mimics that repetition of her work. That's a lot like overexertion. And finally, how does the use of rhyme scheme contribute to the poem? It makes it sound like a song, like it's just something that repeats. So, as you read your next poem, don't let it scare you. Treat it like an onion, one piece at a time. Also remember to look a little deeper with each reading. It doesn't mean you have to read the entire poem 3 times in a row. Just go back and deal with your notes and look at how those devices, such as rhyme and alliteration and repetition, what they do for the overall text. I hope you've enjoyed today's lesson. Please be sure to check out our others.
Thank you so much, Ms. Thrash. All text resources from today's lesson are from commonlit.org. We would like to thank them for publicly sharing these valuable resources. The views and opinions expressed in this lesson are those of the text authors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the Mississippi Department of Education. Thank you again, scholars, for joining us today. We'll see you next time.